Well, I hope it's okay with you if I start with a compliment. I want to say thank you to all of you for getting here by 10:30. Nice job. It's good for you to get on in and have a chance to connect with other people, kind of let your soul catch up to your body, have that chance to settle in, and be ready to worship. So, like you all understand, we're going to pray, and we're going to sing to Jesus. Father God in heaven, as we walk into this place today, we're grateful that we get to share this time with a family that loves you. We're grateful that we get to sing to you and express to you how very much we love you and adore you. We pray that you will hear that rising not only from our lips today, but from our hearts as well. In your name, Jesus. Amen.
It is the second Sunday in November, which means Christmas is creeping in on us. Now, I need to straighten something out. Christmas spirit can last the entire year. However, Christmas music can be played for 28 days. Period. End of story. The Bible says it's a sin to play Christmas music outside of the day after Thanksgiving through Christmas Day, right? It doesn't. But I want to, if there's one amendment we could make, that's the one that I would make, okay? Slow down polls, cool it. I can't handle Christmas yet. That being said, we have 4 soul care questions left for the year. And that would be beautiful if we were able to use all the weeks for the rest of the year, but we have Advent coming. So we need to kind of race through the last 4 soul care questions, which is always a good thing to do when you're trying to get deep and, look in at yourself with these deep, questions. And this question today is actually going to feel like I've packed all of the rest of the questions into one, because it says, am I jealous, impure, critical, irritable, touchy, or distrustful? Check. That's my everyday. That's not just this is not just one period of time. This is, wow, holy cow, each one of those every single day. This is terrible. I have some admitting to do here, a little bit of a confession. I've been working on some house projects, because I bought a house in June, needed a lot of work. So one of the things that I've been looking forward to is getting up in the attic and actually making some storage space. But it's an attic that I can't stand in, and there were no boards laid out, so I couldn't use any of the space. So I'm starting to get boards up there and laying everything in place. I'm feeling like a man for once. I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. Look at me, Two Man Taylor. Yeah. My problem was in my groove. I had music playing, and I'm going along. I would smack my head. I would smack my head probably 35 times, and I'm getting short. I'm getting impatient. And I'm starting to realize, hours and hours of being up in, I'm kind of congested today because the fiberglass, that I'm breathing in from the blow insulation, probably not healthy. Probably should have been wearing a mask. But anyway, I'm getting really, anxious. So I finally, I come down, I'm I gotta call it quits on that project for now. So that's Friday night. I wake up Saturday morning, and I'm thinking, all right, I'll go back at it. Try this again this afternoon, when my wife walks in, and she goes, hey, Brian, and she's sipping her tea. She goes, bad news, the pool cover ripped. A second time. So this is the second, new pool owners, again, we don't really know what we're doing. I thought putting a cover on the pool would be pretty easy, right? Keep it in place, no wind, water's not gonna freeze, all that good stuff. Nope, I'm a terrible, terrible homeowner. And this pool cover ripped for the second time. So I'm coming up with a new plan, trying to figure out what am I going to do. And I have this expert plan where I'm going to take all of the bottles, gallon jugs of pool shock that I have left over. I'm just going to fill them with sand, put them to hold this tarp down. To hopefully that'll work. Again, in my head, where this plan was, it was great. I'm just going to have the tarp all even around the pool. So in order to do that, I've got to put these jugs. I took carabiners, clipped it to the jug, clipped it to the tarp, right? And I put it on the edge of the pool, all right? So all the way around the pool, I've got all these gallon jugs that are resting nice and neat. Everything's going according to plan. Again, according to plan in my head. So I start taking them down to make this tarp taut. And what I didn't explain to Riley was that we needed to do it slowly and that it needed to be done in a certain order. Because if you do it in a different order than what was up here, the tarp is not going to handle it very well. So she, again, trying to be helpful without any instruction from me, starts taking these jugs down, and then they all kind of fell off and just ripped the tarp. In that moment, your thoughts? Check. Irritable? Check. Touchy? Check. Yeah, and critical. Absolutely. My first reaction was not, oh man, bummer, thanks for trying to help Riley, we can get this figured out. It was, what are you doing? Why did you do that? I have this plan. She's like, you didn't tell me. And I'm still I'm not yelling at her. I'm just, will Yeah, I was yelling at him. So, in that moment, I had to take a step back and just like, all right, you know what? Again, we've had a conversation. I've been straightened out. Okay? I checked my heart. But I told Riley, I'm like, would you just go inside, please, until I can figure out what needs to happen next. Again, in that moment, I'm fuming, I'm mad at Stone Tarp, I'm mad that I haven't decided to buy a house with a pool, all these things are rifling through my head, and I just needed to stop and breathe. One of the tactics that Riley uses in her 4th grade classroom to help her 4th graders settle down is something that we can all do. You need to take a deep breath in and count 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. During that deep breath. You can't speak it, if you're trying, you can't breathe in and talk at the same time. So again, don't choke yourself. But she tells them, breathe in, count 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, and then breathe out as hard as you can. So let's all practice this together, okay? So again, we're going to breathe in, 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, and then load out, expel all that bad juju, okay? So, ready? Okay. She has them do that 3 consecutive times. Now, we're not going to practice 3 times because I know some of you are worried about cough breath. Again, front row is grossed out by my breath right now. But sometimes we just need to stop and breathe and realize God is in control. It's all going to be okay. We may not be okay in that moment. We may not be okay with that day, or that week, or that month, that year. But God's got it. We need to recognize that. We need to give Him the chance to show us that it's going to be okay. So, during your moment of silence here, we're going to have about 30 seconds for you to start thinking about answering this question. And again, don't look up here and be like, yeah. We all know, everybody is everything on this list, okay? But try and peg that situation that you find yourself in regularly where these come up most often. Another moment, especially for me, driving. I'm not the person who's tailgating, but I'm definitely the person who kind of peeks on the shoulder, to get in the side view mirror and, hey, get out the way! Or trucks, semis. They're in the left lane on 80. They should be blocked from 355 to Morris, okay, from going in the left lane. But as soon as they get over, I'll cut in front of them and point. Yeah, again, I'm terrible. Stop. Breathe. It's going to be okay. We're going to get there. So whether it's driving, whether it's conversations with your spouse, your relationship with kids, relationship with your parents, teachers, boss, co-workers, whatever it is, whatever instance you find these coming up, make a plan. Be prepared. One of the greatest bits of advice that one of our leaders, Don, has ever given our high school guys is that a failure to prepare is preparing to fail. Prepare your heart, prepare your mind this week. Where do you need to stop? Again, you're going to have about 30 seconds to start thinking about that. After that, our worship team is going to be playing a really awesome new song. And during that song, you can move to either the 2 stations in the back or the 2 stations up front to receive communion. Again, if you need that gluten-free option, we do have that on stage.
It's a beautiful song with a tremendous reminder that communion is not something we take. Communion is the way we live. It's not just something we come and enjoy and then walk away, but we live communion. We live in remembrance. We live as people who are influenced by the fact that Jesus died for our sins. So I'm so grateful for that song. I am kind kind of laughing at these questions. I feel like you should begin every week with "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." I mean, it's just kind of, it's become confession time, and I'm realizing we should have implemented this when we were 5. Imagine how much would have changed. But anyway, what we're going to do right now, a little bit different. We're going to do a pre-teach before the teach. There's a concept that comes up in the Old Testament that we've seen already in Genesis. We're going to see it in Exodus, and really on through the rest of the Bible. It's the concept of the promised land. We hear the term the promised land. And so we need to ask, what is the promised land? Where is it? What's it all about? Why does it exist? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a world map. This is the other side of the world. This is the other side of the globe, and the area in green that you see there, that's the area that's commonly referred to as the Middle East. So that's the Jewish nations as well as the Arab nations that surround it. And I hope you can see this little red circle right there. That's what we typically refer to as the land of Israel, right there. It's kind of humorous when you look at it, because you realize that, the entire world is battling over this little plot of land. Look at all the land on that globe. And this little land, this little piece of land, this strip is precious to everybody. It's about 50 miles wide, a couple hundred miles long. And it's this land that people look at and say, I want that, I need that, that's mine. So it's within this area that we see the territory known as the Promised Land. When you think of typically an image of the nation of Israel, it'll look something like this. So you have the city of Dan, the tribe of Dan to the north, all the way down, Judah and Judea to the south. You have the Sea of Galilee at the top of the nation, the Jordan River running down the side, the Dead Sea at the bottom, the lowest point in all of the world. If you ever get a chance to be there, it's a really cool place. The air is very dense. It's a very quiet place. You don't have to wear sunscreen, believe it or not. The sun is so far away, and the atmosphere is so thick that you don't even need sunscreen if you go. You cannot get a sunburn. No kidding. So anyway, this is typically what people think of as the Promised Land. And truth be told, that's part of the Promised Land. Remember from Genesis chapter 15, in verse 18, we read a verse that God gave to Abraham. He said, I give you this land. I'm giving this land to your descendants, all the way from the border of Egypt to the great Euphrates River. Now, in this particular version, it says what? I'm giving you this land from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates River. What's the river of Egypt? Nile. You guys did way better than the first service. It was like they're all nervous that they're going to get enough on the test. I heard. Yeah, the Nile River. It's like the only river in Egypt, right? It's the main river. So God says from the Nile River all the way over to the Euphrates River, which is, over to Iraq, this is the land that he says, I promise this to your nation, to your descendants. So when you look at that, it looks more like this. This is the land of promise that God gave to Abraham. And I think there's a beautiful spiritual lesson to be learned here. Time and time again, when the Israelites were told to go into the land and possess it, the Bible would say they went in and they obeyed God, but they did not obey God completely. They obeyed him partially. They do some, but they wouldn't do all. And the writer keeps making comment. They obeyed, but they didn't obey completely. You know what incomplete obedience led to? Incomplete blessing. Ultimately, they do not have all the land that's promised to them, but only a portion of the land that's promised to them. And I can't help but wonder how many times we're not in the same boat. That we incompletely obey God, rather than wholeheartedly and completely obeying God. And in the process, we receive some of the blessing of God, but we don't receive all of what God intended for us. So this is the area that would be typically referred to as the Promised Land. Now here's the question. Why is it a promised land? What's so promising about it? Well, on one hand, it's the promised land because God said to Abraham, this is the land I'm giving to your descendants. But on the other hand, it is a promising land. If you look at the area that I circled there, that's Canaan, that's Israel, and it actually serves as the kind of the crossroads, the highway of the known world at that time. If you're going to do commerce between Egypt and Mesopotamia, you're not going to cut across the ground. That's desert, you're going to die out there. You're going to go up the Mediterranean Sea on over to the other side. So Canaan ends up being like I-55 and I-80. Lots of trucks. There's just a lot of commerce going up and back down through this land. So they're kind of at the center of their universe at the time, which is pretty amazing when you think of this. Eventually, there's a message about Jesus that's going to go out through all the world. What better place to have that message land than right there at I-80 and I-55, crossroads of the universe. There it is, and it's able to spread to the north and spread to the south, spread out throughout the whole world. So you have this strategic location, commercially, militarily. The other thing that we need to understand is that it's in the area known as the Fertile Crescent. Oh my word, some of you just went all the way back to high school. Boom! Fertile Crescent. You remember the Fertile Crescent, right? You look at this area, the green there, coming from the Nile, on up Canaan, across Syria, down to the Persian Gulf, almost creates like a crescent moon. This is what's known as the Fertile Crescent. This is an area that is able to be farmed. It's got water. All the rest, the ground there, lots of desert. So people wanted this area, and part of the reason they wanted it, water. Water was very, very important. No water, no life. Well, you look at the land of Israel, what do they have? They have the Golan Heights to the north of the land, snow-capped mountains, the snow melts, water comes down the Jordan River, fills the Sea of Galilee, keeps running down the Jordan River, on into the Dead Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea to the other side. There's water to be had. And those water rights are one of the things that everybody fights over. Not only is there water, there's also natural protection. With the Golan Heights to the north, they were protected from their enemies to the north, and quite literally the enemies that would be coming on down through the land. So they have natural protective boundaries. Having said all that, this area ends up becoming, it becomes really the battlefield of the known world. When people go to war, guess where they go? They go to Israel. They go to Canaan. And that's where the fights happen. So it's kind of like in the modern world, whether it was World War I or World War II. I have a Polish-Hungarian ancestry, battleground of the world. Asia and Europe always met there, and we were right in the middle of it all. The same is true for Israel. They're right in the middle of it all, which means that they're going to have to be incredibly dependent on God. And I love that God says, ultimately, I'm going to be your protector. I'm going to be your provider. And I'm promising that to you. So one of the questions we have to ask ourselves then is, why is Israel not in the promised land at this time? And we know the surface reason is that there's a famine in the land. There's a famine in Canaan, and Joseph is down in Egypt. He's been sent there by God to literally save the known world at that time. And Jacob and his sons travel down. They travel on down to Egypt and kind of take up residency there. Early in the book of Exodus, we're told that when they go down to Egypt, there are about 70 of them. 70 people travel to the land of Egypt. And part of what God is doing in that place, it's so beautiful, he's provided kind of a greenhouse effect. As this little group of 70 is going to have the opportunity to grow, rather than place them in Canaan, where they're going to be in this constant battle that's going on, and in Canaan, where there are these false gods all around, instead he takes them, places them in Egypt, where they're going to be in kind of a protected greenhouse, and they're going to have the chance to grow. And guess what? They grow. By the time they leave in chapter 12, we're told there are 600,000 male Israelites, men. And they have wives, and they have children. Or in other words, in 430 years, they've grown from 70 to over 1 million. God places them there to grow. There's another reason he places them there. In Genesis 15:16, we're told, in the fourth generation, this is what God's saying to Abraham, in the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached full measure. Now, that's a really kind of a strange verse. You read that, and it's like, okay, God wanted them to sin enough that it was ready, it was time to go ahead and wipe them out. I think we need to read it quite another way. God always offers the opportunity for repentance. The Bible says God is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love. And even to the Amorites, he's saying there's time to repent. Just like Jonah went to Nineveh and said, you can repent, and they did. God's offering them the chance to turn, offering them the chance to go ahead and change. Unfortunately, they do not take up that opportunity. So that kind of gives you the precursor of what we're going to be talking about today. Brian's going to come right now, and we're going to be receiving the morning offering. You have some things for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, go. Next week's going to be a great week for us. Next Sunday at noon, if you want to come join us to play in our, I think it's the 4th annual Turkey Bowl. We're playing some flag football over at Shannon Junior High on the soccer field over there. Again, that game will start at noon. We'll run to 2 or until our legs fall off. So again, that's for all of us. So guys, girls, doesn't matter. Come and join us. It's gonna be a lot of fun hanging out there. We will have like water and things like that. So we want to give you the opportunity to grab lunch and head over and join us there. Later that evening, Revive is going to be extended by an hour. We're going to go from 5 to 8 instead of normal 6 to 8 because the Powell family has decided that they are going to make us Thanksgiving dinner, which is amazing. Looking so forward to that. We're going to have Revive Thanksgiving. Again, great opportunity, high schoolers, to invite some friends in. Again, no pressure night. Just eat some, I promise you, amazing food and hanging out there. We do have arts and class registration open for both junior high and high school. So you go to southfieldchurch.com, go to news and events, find those links. Again, make sure that you're signing up for the right one, especially if you're sending kids to different camps. Don't just put two in the same one. They are different. Make sure you get registered for the right one. Speaking of southfieldchurch.com, if you go there and scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see that blue check mark on the right-hand side. You can click that to receive the links, which is our announcement email for the day. Every Sunday at 8 a.m., this email gets sent out. And today, there are two links. One is for the young couple Bible study that I'm a part of, that's run by the Yosts. We are starting our next Fruit of the Spirit. I don't know either, but whatever. We're starting our next Fruit of the Spirit next week. So if you want to join us, that's on Monday nights. And finally, this is a really cool thing. Every Christmas, it's definitely me. Every Christmas, fight through it. Every Christmas, we do something as a church family to help our immediate community. We've done Rethink Christmas, we've done gas cards, we've done all kinds of cool things to literally reach out and be a known presence in our community. This year, we're focusing on kids. We're focusing on at-risk kids in the greater Joliet area. So if you'd like to get involved in that, you can go to the welcome desk today and receive a name tag.
You can't. We ran out.
Ran out. That's amazing.
We're figuring out what to do, but we ran out in the first service, so.
Believe me, there are plenty of kids. I'm going to explain it anyway.
Yeah.
So we will get more cards.
Well, we don't know that.
We will figure out something.
We're coming up with a plan.
Here's what all the people, everybody that got a card, here's what they get to do. They got a card with the name of a very real kid in the greater Joliet area with one thing that they need and one thing that they want. They're able to take that name, buy the gifts, wrap it up, put the name tag back on it, and bring it to the welcome desk by December 2nd. So I would encourage you, if you didn't get a tag, find a kid who you think it makes
Well,
sense.
we might get tags, so. I'm just not sure, guys. All right? See ya. Good. So, when I was a kid, and even now, I've heard this line over and over again, and you have too. America is a very young nation. America is a very young nation. It's like, yeah, that's true. In 1976, in our bicentennial, I was 13 years old. And I remember at 13 hearing, though our nation was 200, it was a very young nation. And I used to look at like 35-year-olds and say, they're practically dead. How can America be a young nation? This is not possible. It's just not possible. The fact is, we're closing in our 250th anniversary. And think about this. We're not even 3/4 of the way through the period of time that Israel spent in Egypt. That's kind of crazy. It's crazy to think. 430 years they were in that land. From the time Jacob traveled with his sons into the arms of Joseph in Egypt to the night of the Passover is about 430 years, the Bible tells us. The first part of their time in Egypt, they're spent as welcome guests. Egypt loves having them there. And then in the final 200 years,
strategy has the opposite effect. They actually increase in number the more they are oppressed. Next, realizing more drastic measures are necessary, he implements a covert birth control policy in verse 15. There's this pair of women, Shiphrah and Puah, and they serve as the midwives of Israel. Now, they're likely not the only ones. They're probably the ones that oversee the whole process. Pharaoh wants them to kill all the male babies as they're born. But it says, the Bible says the midwives fear God and they can't go through with this. Pharaoh is furious. He summons them and says, the women, and what do they say? They say the women are so healthy that they give birth before we even show up. I mean, we can't even get there, and boom, there's a baby. According to these midwives, Israeli women were experiencing record delivery times. I mean, lots of babies born in calves. You know, it's just like, boom, we can't help it. This is what's happening. Now, just an aside, some of you read this and you're wondering, does this verse justify lying? Especially when the cause is righteous. And the answer is no. The Bible never, ever, ever justifies lying. Having said that, here's the deal. If you're ever forced into committing mass murder by a genocidal maniac, and the only way you can imagine to subvert the plan of this genocidal maniac is to lie, not God, I'm probably not going to criticize you. All right? But if you use this passage to try to justify the kind of self-serving deceit that many of us engage, that destroys trust and shatters relationships, you're making a big mistake. It offers no justification for lying. Pharaoh determines that the only way to control the Israelite population is to enlist the entire citizenry. So he gives the order that every boy child must be thrown into the Nile River. And the river ran red with blood. The blood of little babies. Can you identify your Pharaoh today? In some area of your life, you are beaten down, you are discouraged, and it just feels like time to give up hope. Exodus teaches us an unimaginable lesson when the pharaohs of our lives are bearing down upon us. It teaches us that hope can be found in our river of hopelessness. Sometimes it's in the river itself where we find the greatest hope. The torture designed by our Pharaoh to control us can actually serve as our means of deliverance. The next part of the story gives us great reason to have hope. Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 to 10, tells the story of the birth of Moses and his ultimate deliverance. The 400 years that God foretold to Abraham is about to come to an end. It's time for a deliverer to come on the scene. As human beings, if we're writing this story, we probably would have brought in some massive foreign army to rescue them, extricate them. Let's get them out of there. Some other tremendous force. But God starts with a baby. And be warned, it's not the last time God will choose to deliver people from hopelessness through the birth of a baby. I love the way God does this. He places the deliverer right in the jaws of death. First, the God-fearing woman has a son, and rather than allowing him to be killed, she hides him in plain sight. What better way to hide the child from death than in the death trap itself? So this loving mother places her child in a basket in the river of blood. I've had babies. Some of you have had babies too. And I kind of pay attention. I've learned an important fact about babies. They cry. Babies cry. They cry when they are sad. They cry when they are hungry. They cry when they are wet. They cry when they are tired. They cry when they are strapped in a car seat at 6571 Telegraph Road in St. Louis and have to drive 2.5 hours to 10 Pendleton Way, Bloomington, Illinois, 61704. They cry the entire way, don't they, Shelley? They cry and cry and cry. Poor little Brian used to sit next to her and just say, make her stop. Just make her stop. Babies cry. This baby cried as well. In verse 6, he cried. And the crying that should have betrayed him is actually the crying that softened the heart of his deliverer. Pharaoh's daughter looks at this crying baby and says, oh, what a sweet baby. And you just gotta love the way this story unfolds. Only God can do this, right? His sister is standing off in the reeds. Miriam standing there. She sees this. She sees that the heart of the Pharaoh's daughter is softening. And she comes out and says, do you want me to find someone to take care of the baby? Oh, sure, do that, honey. Okay, I know someone. She goes home and gets mom, and guess what? Mom gets paid to nurse her baby. This is crazy. It's incredible. Right there, God is saving this child. Pharaoh's daughter gives him a name that will remind him for the rest of the day of this miracle. Every time he hears the word Moses, he'll be reminded of the meaning, I drew him out of the water. I drew him out of the water. Victory is resting in the jaws of death. The next time you think your situation is hopeless, would you open your Bible and read Exodus 2, 1 through 10? This is the God who wants to deliver you from the grips of your Pharaoh. The deliverer of Israel is rescued from the river of blood and becomes the adopted grandchild of a man who is trying his best to keep the will of God from happening. Now I want to shift here because we could spend time all morning focusing on our pharaohs and our need to be delivered. But I'd like to shift and focus instead on the fact that sometimes God calls us into someone else's hopelessness. Sometimes God calls us to actually be the deliverer for someone else. And so we want to personalize these lessons today that God teaches Moses and asks, is it possible that God is calling me to be a potential deliverer? As Moses grows up, he finds himself living between two worlds. He's concerned for his people of origin. He's concerned for the Israelites. But he's been educated and trained in Egypt, and he's the adopted grandson now of Pharaoh. This conflicted state finally comes to a head in chapter 2. It says, many years later, when Moses had grown, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During that visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand. The passage says he looked to the left. He looked to the right. But which way did he not look? He didn't look up. He didn't look up. He didn't look up to God. He didn't ask God, what do you want to do? God, what do you think? No, instead, he looked at the situation and he decided to take matters into his own hands. He acted on his simple impulses rather than trusting God. A lot of times when we believe we're being called into deliverance, what we do is take matters into our own hands. And God has a lesson for us as deliverers. Here's the first lesson. Reality is Moses is not the deliverer, God is. God is the deliverer, not me. Before Moses can be useful as a deliverer, he needs to be delivered from himself. He needs to learn that God is the deliverer. He needs to learn to control the temptation to take matters into his own hands. The look to the left and the look to the right was not apparently very effective. Pharaoh learns what Moses has done. He puts a price on his head, and once again we find a Bible character on the run. After the story of Jacob, we should suspect something, right? God is about to retool Moses. God's school of character formation is encountered when people are on the run. It is out in the wilderness that Moses will be taught by God how to lead his people, how to deliver them, not using his own personal strength, but relying on the strength and power of God. Lesson 1, God is the true deliverer, not me. I need to get out of my own way and let God use me and retool me for the purposes for which he created me. Second lesson, deliverers have a heart for justice and can't help but get involved. Right off the bat, we see something about the heart of Moses. He has a passion for justice, and he can't handle it when he sees people oppressed. There's this group of women, they're being harassed at a well, and he steps in and he fights their battles. Ultimately, he marries one of the women that he rescued. Now married, Moses seems to have Egypt clearly behind him. He has a family. He's a shepherd, which, by the way, is a profession that the Egyptians despised. He spent 40 years in Egypt and another 40 away in the wilderness. Moses just seems to love his new life. Old times and places, they're a distant memory. Moses has forgotten about the Israelites in Egypt. But God is not forgotten. we read, years passed, and the king of Egypt died. But the Israelites continued to groan under their burden of slavery. They cried out for help, and their cry rose up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He looked down on the people of Israel and he knew it was time to act. Now just a thought here. God remembered is not a way of saying God's forgetful. You know, you don't have God goes, where did I place my Israelites? Oh, there they are, good. You know, it's not like us trying to find our phone or our keys. It's not that God forgot something, okay? He remembered is a statement often used in the Bible to say he's about to take action. It's time. It's time. I'm ready to go. The life of Moses has become fairly ordinary and uneventful in Midian. Some might even characterize it as boring. For about 40 years, he took care of sheep. But one day, everything changed. Chapter 3 starts by saying, one day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't the bush burning up? I must go see. Verse 3 indicates Moses took action. And that action is about to change his destiny. Another version puts it this way. Moses turned aside to see this sight. There's a sense in which everything in this story hinges on Moses' decision to turn aside. He doesn't have to do it. He could have said, I'm a very busy man with much to do. He could have said, let someone else figure it out. My life is good right now. He could have said, there's got to be an expert out there in bushes that do not burn. Let them take care of it. And in the process, he would have missed his calling. He would have missed his destiny. He would have missed the very reason he was born and drawn out of the river of blood. Lesson 3. Deliverers turn aside from ordinary life to hear the extraordinary voice of God. They turn aside, and when they notice, they go toward that noticing. Thankfully, he turns aside, and in doing so, he meets God face to face or face to burning branch. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people Israel. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of the land of Egypt, into their own fertile and spacious land. It's a land flowing with milk and honey, a land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites now live. God has not forgotten or abandoned his people. Hope is not lost. It is time. It is time for one of the greatest rescue missions in all of human history. So massive in proportion that when we hear the word Exodus, we think of a mass of people being delivered from slavery in a foreign nation. It's time to go home. It's time to go back to the promised land. It's time to go back to a land flowing with milk and honey. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, God said, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abused them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt. I love this. God goes through all this and he goes, oh, by the way, I'm sending you. I wonder if Moses, he's so caught up in the moment, right? He almost misses it. Yeah, these people need to be rescued. Great. It's about time you deliver them. You're taking them to an awesome place. That's wonderful. Neighborhood sounds a little weird. Hittites, Amorites, Jebusites, Perizzites, Cellulites, all that stuff. I don't know. But God, you can handle it. You can handle it. You're God. Wait, what? You're sending me? Are you kidding me? Great plan up until then. Let me give you 5 reasons why I'm the wrong guy. And he does. He gives 5 reasons. Lesson 4. Deliverers are not necessarily extraordinarily brave. They're just willing to be used the way God wants. You keep thinking you'll finally be a deliverer when you're finally brave. No, you won't. No, you won't. No, you won't. We might find what follows to be disappointing. We do not see a man of legendary mythical proportion accepting with great vigor the ultimate challenge to single-handedly rescue this nation so desperate for a hero. The funny thing is, 40 years earlier, he might have, right? But not now. Instead, we find a guy who makes excuses. A reluctant hero minus the hero. Actually, you know who he is? He's human. He's you and he is me. He's not a hero, he's a human. A real person with real fears and real apprehensions and real self-doubt and real reluctance to get involved. He's us. He does give God 5 objections. Who am I? Really? Me? Who are you? I mean, what are people going to say? What if they won't listen is his 3rd objection. And God responds by saying, throw your staff on the ground. I love this. Throw the staff on the ground, it becomes a snake. Whoa, okay, what's this? And then God says, pick it up by the tail. Now, when you pick up a snake, some of you go, never. When you pick up a snake, you do not pick up a snake by the tail. You pick it up right behind the head, or even better, you crush it and then you pick it up. But you don't pick it up by the tail, it's going to come back and bite you. Even in that, God is saying, you can trust me. You can trust me. Back to our objections. Number 4, speaking is not one of my core competencies. I don't have what it takes, God. Have you ever said that to him? Finally, having exhausted all his best reasons, he just finally says, please, just send someone else. My wife's really brave. Send her. He didn't say that, but it is ironic that up until now, all the heroes in this story have been females. Every last one of them. Well, Moses accepts the challenge. He follows God. And what follows is a world of victories and defeats, of advances and setbacks that feel an awful lot like real life. Ironically, the rescue mission begins where the rescue mission started, the place that reminds Moses of his name. In the first plague, God turned a river into blood, that same river of blood where he was rescued as a baby. God brings 10 supernatural plagues on Egypt to break the stubborn grip and the arrogant heart of Pharaoh. We don't have time to study them in depth, but each plague is directed directly at one of the false gods of Egypt. Every one of them. Pharaoh himself claimed to be a god, and he was not able to stop the plagues. Understand, God wasn't arbitrarily just sitting there and having going, I got to torture these people. What should I do? I know frogs. Frogs in the bed. That does it every time. No, each plague was a deliberate tool used to get the people of Egypt to question the object of their false worship and to understand that Jehovah, the creator of the universe, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and Moses, is the only God worthy of worship. And in chapter 12, we learn that the people are released at the 10th and final plague. 430 years. Mission accomplished. 430 years of foreign travel has come to an end. It's time to go home, back to Israel, back to the promised land, back to the land flowing with milk and honey. Now, as they're walking away, they might be going, this Moses, he's amazing. Who knows? Moses might be going, this Moses, he's amazing. So just as on the page it's clear, one more time. The Red Sea. Final lesson, God is the hero. Every delivery is totally dependent on him. One more time, he makes clear, there's no way Moses can part this water, but I can. There's no way Moses is going to stop that army, but I can. And God makes it clear that he is the hero. Every delivery totally depends on him. So as we wrap up, I ask you today, from what Pharaoh do you need to be delivered? The God of Israel, the God of Moses, is the God of Southfield, is your God. He is your rescuer. Is it possible that God is calling you to be a deliverer? I'm telling you quite flatly that if you believe that will happen when you become brave, you will sit in your chair. You will not act. Fear rules our lives. I read a story this past week. It's actually in the obituary. On a man named Jack Nagel, lived to 96 years old. Jack was a survivor of the Holocaust. spent time in two of the worst death camps of the war. When he comes out, his entire family is gone. And he gets to start again from square one. And it tells the story of his life and how he got into business and all kinds of stuff. But there's this final line that just wouldn't let me go. He apparently wrote a short memoir. And he wrote this line: "One sure guarantee of a mediocre life is a life lived in fear." Coming from a guy that survived 2 death camps, I think I'm going to listen to that. One sure guarantee of a mediocre life is a life lived in fear. Is it possible that fear is what's causing you to not call out to God to break the grip of your Pharaoh? Is it possible that fear is what keeps you in your chair when injustice is happening and says someone else can do it, I'm just too scared? The fear is not going to go away. It's not. But the God of the universe is by our side. The God of interarms is by our side. And he is the deliverer, not us. He's more powerful than any Pharaoh we might face. Oh, God in heaven, teach us this important lesson. It is likely that our fears will not go away. But even more than our ever-present fears, we have an ever-present God who reigns and rules forever and ever. You are the deliverer. And we chose to join you in anything and everything you call us to do in your world. Amen. So before you leave, or as you leave today, I just want to say this. Next week is probably going to be one of the more important messages you'll hear, which I don't say that often. So you can be like, wow, it's going to be kind of exciting. We're going to be looking at Leviticus. I'm not being funny, actually, because, oh, it is funny. Modern Christians have a real-time understanding of how the law works. And it's because we have a misunderstanding of how the law works that very often when we're confronted by the modern world about issues of the law, we stand there going, instead of being able to give a reason for the hope that is in us, which is what Peter said we should be able to do. So I hope you'll come back next week to get a clear understanding of what's going on in the law of God and how it actually applies to our lives today. You enjoy your week. We'll see you.